Part 1. Max's Journey from Abandoned Pup to Hero. Have you ever wondered, could a dog, once abandoned by the entire world, become a miracle for someone, maybe even for an entire community? Tonight, I'll tell you the story of Max, a little pup once mocked, rejected, and thrown away. And yet, the same people who turned their backs on him would one day whisper in disbelief, "We were so wrong about him." Denver, a freezing November night. The sky was pitch black, heavy clouds rolling in, and rain poured down like needles tearing the night apart. The wind howled through empty streets, carrying cold mist and dried leaves. Dim yellow streetlights flickered against the wet asphalt. And there, under the pale glow, a tiny shadow shivered by the roadside, his fur drenched and muddy, his breathing ragged and shallow. That was Max, only 8 months old, yet he had suffered more than most dogs should in a lifetime. Once, his big brown eyes had shone with curiosity and joy. Now they were dulled by exhaustion and despair. Max curled beneath a worn wooden awning, trembling against the cold rain. He hadn't been born to wander the streets. Once, he'd been the heart of a small, loving family. Sunny mornings chasing a plastic ball across the yard. Winter nights curled up in the warm arms of Tommy, his 10-year-old best friend. But all of that ended because Max was too playful. One chewed shoe, one broken vase, one bark at a strange noise, small mistakes. But to the adults, Max became a problem. One day they put him in the car. He wagged his tail, thinking it was an adventure. But then came the cold words, "I don't need you anymore." The door slammed, the car drove away, leaving Max standing in the rain. He ran after them, barking until his voice cracked. But the car only grew smaller, and that was the last time Max ever saw his family. From that day on, Max's life became a fight for survival, digging through trash for food, drinking rainwater from puddles, sleeping under broken rooftops. Nights were long, cold, and silent. Sometimes kids threw rocks at him. "Dirty dog! Get out!" They laughed. Adults waved him away. "Go away!" they shouted. But Max didn't understand. He just wanted to be loved. The more he searched, the more he faced rejection. Loneliness became his only companion. That night, Max collapsed under the awning, too weak to move. Rain seeped into his fur, down to his trembling bones. He closed his eyes, breath shallow and fading. Maybe it's okay to sleep forever. But fate had other plans. A silver car drove past. Its headlights swept over Max's small, shivering body. Inside the car sat Robert Martinez, a 45-year-old doctor, exhausted after a long hospital shift. He slowed down, frowning. "A puppy. Out here, in the rain." Robert hit the brakes. The hazard lights blinked red. He stepped out into the storm. That was the moment. Everything began to change. Cliffhanger, narrator voice, soft, suspenseful. And that was where Max's true story began. Part 2. First encounter. A bond forged in the rain. Robert slammed on the brakes, his silver car skidding to a stop at the roadside. The headlights cut through the pounding rain, illuminating a small, shivering figure curled under an old wooden awning. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his breath fogging the window. A puppy? Out here, in this storm? I can't just leave him. Robert turned on the hazard lights, grabbed his raincoat, and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The wind whipped against his face, cold raindrops stinging his skin, but he didn't care. Every step toward Max felt heavier, slower, the tension growing with each passing second. Robert crouched a few feet away, keeping a safe distance. His voice was soft, careful. "Hey there, little guy. Are you okay? Don't be scared." Max opened his big brown eyes, his soaked fur clinging to his small frame. Seeing a stranger approach, instinct screamed at him to stay away. He growled softly, pressing himself tighter against the wall. Robert didn't move closer. Instead, he lowered himself further, slowly extending a hand into the rain, palm open. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The rain kept falling, pounding like a drum on the rooftop above. 1 minute passed, then 2. Robert's hand stayed there, steady, patient, warm. Finally, Max sniffed the air cautiously. The man didn't smell like danger. With trembling steps, Max moved forward, just an inch. Robert smiled faintly, careful not to startle him. Max hesitated, then leaned closer, and gently licked Robert's fingertips. That single touch was enough. An invisible bond sparked to life between them. Robert slowly wrapped Max in his wet, thick coat and lifted him into his arms. Max trembled, but didn't resist. "It's okay now. I've got you," Robert whispered. "I'm taking you home, I promise." Inside the warm cabin of the car, Robert wrapped Max in a soft towel. The heater hummed gently, filling the silence with warmth. Max curled up tightly, still cautious, but too exhausted to fight. Robert glanced at him and whispered, almost to himself, "You know, I was abandoned too once." Max's ears twitched. Robert's voice trembled as he continued. "When I was 6, my mother left me. I kept wondering why I wasn't good enough to be loved." Max tilted his head slightly, sensing the weight in Robert's voice. Robert forced a faint smile. "But then, I found Buddy, my first dog. He saved me." His gaze drifted to the empty passenger seat, as if seeing a memory only he could touch. Buddy was always there, until that day. He ran into the street, and I couldn't save him. Robert's voice cracked, his hands tightening on the wheel. He looked at Max and whispered, voice low but firm, "I won't let that happen again, not this time." Robert's cozy apartment glowed warmly in soft golden light. On the wall hung old family photos. In the corner, a small dog bed remained, untouched, Buddy's bed. Robert dried Max with a fluffy towel and placed a bowl of warm water and soft food in front of him. "Eat. You need your strength," he said gently, stepping back so Max wouldn't feel pressured. Max hesitated. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Finally, he lowered his head and began to eat slowly, cautiously, savoring each bite. Robert smiled softly, sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading quietly from a small book. He didn't look directly at Max, giving him space to feel safe. For the first time in months, Max felt warmth. Not just on his fur, but in his heart. Part 3. Shadows of the Past. Buddy's secret. Morning sunlight streamed gently through the apartment window. Max stirred, curled up on the soft rug, his body still trembling from restless dreams. Robert moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, the smell of coffee filling the air. "Morning, Buddy," Robert greeted softly, placing a warm bowl of soft food in front of Max. Max hesitated for a moment, then began eating small bites, his cautious eyes still darting toward Robert. Robert had learned to give him space. No staring directly. No touching unless Max initiated it. No forcing him to do anything he wasn't ready for. Robert understood. Trust needed to be earned, one moment at a time. That night, silence filled the apartment. But Max couldn't sleep. His body twitched, paws trembling. He whimpered softly, trapped in a nightmare. In his dream, Genesis Lab came alive. Cold, sterile rooms. The metallic clang of instruments. The sharp sting of disinfectant. The helpless cries of puppies in cages. Max whimpered louder, his small body shaking violently. Robert woke instantly and rushed to him. "Max, it's okay, you're safe." He wrapped Max gently in his arms, whispering, "No one will ever hurt you again. I promise." The next day, Max wandered around the living room and found his small, neatly folded dog bed in the corner. He sniffed it curiously. It still carried the faint scent of another dog. This was Buddy's bed. Robert stepped out from the kitchen, freezing in the doorway as he saw Max curl up next to it. His voice cracked softly. "Buddy used to sleep there too." Max looked up, their eyes locking for a brief, silent moment. It was as if an invisible thread of grief and longing connected them both. One afternoon, while Robert was at work, Max's nose led him beneath the sofa. He pawed at something hidden deep inside, a dusty cardboard box. Inside, Max found a torn tennis ball, a faded teddy bear, and a small red collar engraved with the name Buddy. That night, Max carried the teddy bear to Robert and dropped it softly at his feet. Robert froze, his hands trembling as he picked it up. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "Buddy, I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Max sat beside him silently, his brown eyes deep with empathy. No words were spoken. But two broken hearts found each other that night. A few days later, Robert was cleaning his bookshelf when Max discovered a photograph lying upside down on the table. Robert quickly tried to hide it, but Max had already seen it. The picture showed a smiling 10-year-old boy, Robert himself, hugging Buddy. Behind it, handwritten in small letters, Genesis Lab, July 14th. The narrator's voice lowers dark and foreboding. Genesis Lab. That name will change everything. And soon, Max will have to face a past he never dared to remember. Part 4. The Woman Who Knew. Genesis awakens. A bright, sunny morning. Robert walked Max through the park, the grass still glistening with morning dew. Max bounded happily across the open field, tail wagging, when a woman suddenly approached. She was in her early 50s, with grey streaked hair and red, tired eyes. When she saw Max, she froze. Her hand trembled violently. Where did you get this dog?" Robert immediately tightened his grip on Max's leash, his voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Her voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. "I think this is my son's dog. His name is Max." The sound of his name startled Max, his ears folded back, his entire body trembling. He pressed tightly against Robert's leg, seeking safety. The woman knelt slowly on the grass, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Max, it's you, isn't it? Do you remember Tommy? My son." At the sound of Tommy's name, Max froze. Flashes of distant memories erupted in his mind. Tommy's laughter, the green tennis ball, the soft scent of their old home. Robert steadied the woman gently. "Please, who are you?" She handed him her ID card, her hands trembling. "I'm Linda, Tommy's mother. My son and Max disappeared 2 years ago." Linda's voice shook as she recounted that day. 2 years ago, Tommy took Max outside to play. Minutes later, I heard him scream. I ran out. Max's collar was lying on the road, but Tommy and Max were gone. Linda searched everywhere. Posters, police reports, endless nights of crying. The only clue the police found was a white van with a faded logo, Genesis Lab. At the mention of the name, Max growled softly, his fur bristling. His ears shot up, his body tense, eyes flashing with a memory he couldn't quite reach. Robert frowned, confusion and dread mixing in his voice. Genesis Lab? What do they have to do with Tommy and Max? Linda shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't know, but I've been searching for answers ever since. That night, Max dreamed again. A cold, sterile room. White fluorescent lights blinding his eyes, rows of steel cages lined against the walls, puppies whimpering, screaming, footsteps pounding on cold tile floors, and there, Tommy, strapped to a chair, crying. A man in a white lab coat held a syringe filled with a glowing green serum marked X23. A deep, cold voice echoed, "Begin the experiment." Max jolted awake, panting heavily, his fur soaked in sweat. Robert rushed to his side, wrapping him tightly in his arms. It's okay, Max, I promise. We'll find out the truth. The next day, Robert began digging into Genesis Lab. On an old online archive, he found a faded headline. Genesis Lab accused of illegal animal experimentation. Scrolling further, his heart stopped. A leaked document listed test subjects. Sample 47. Max. Positive. Neural response to X23. Sample 48. Tommy. High adaptation to serum X23. Robert's chest tightened. He called Linda immediately. You need to come to my house, now. Linda arrived carrying a folder of old papers, burnt around the edges. Inside was a photo, one that froze Robert's blood. Tommy and Max, locked in a cold, sterile room. Tiny monitoring devices strapped to their necks. Linda whispered through her tears. Genesis Lab took them, and they never stopped. Robert clenched his fists, his voice steady but filled with fire. We'll find Tommy and Max. We'll never live in fear again. That night, after putting Max to bed, Robert's phone rang. A trembling woman's voice whispered through the static. I used to work at Genesis Lab. If you want to find Tommy, go to Warehouse 17 in the West Industrial District, but be careful. They're watching you. The line went dead. Robert stared into the darkness, his breath sharp and heavy. Max looked up at him, ears alert, eyes burning with determination. Robert grabbed his coat and whispered softly, Come on, Max. We're going to find Tommy. Across the street, a black car flicked its headlights on. Inside, a man in a white lab coat muttered under his breath, Sample 47 has finally started moving. Fade out. Narrator whispers, dark and foreboding. Genesis Lab, the game has just begun. Part 5, Warehouse. 17, The Forbidden Files, midnight. Robert drove through the deserted West Industrial District, headlights slicing through the pouring rain. Max sat in the passenger seat, ears perked, his breathing fast and uneven. In the back, Linda clutched Tommy's old red collar tightly, her knuckles white. Robert parked the car a short distance away from Warehouse 17. The massive steel door loomed ahead, secured by an electronic lock, blinking red. Linda whispered, trembling. How are we going to open that? Robert reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small lock-picking kit. Leave it to me. With a soft click, the lock turned green. The heavy steel door creaked open with a haunting screech. Inside was complete darkness. Robert grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting across dusty shelves and rusty crates. The air was thick with the smell of chemicals and rust. On an old metal table lay a stack of sealed documents. Robert brushed off the dust and read the label. Project X-23, Animal Test Subjects. He opened the file, flipping through the pages rapidly. Sample 47, Max, Exceptional Neural Response. Sample 48, Tommy, High Compatibility with Serum X-23. Linda gasped, her hands shaking violently. Dear God, they used Tommy as a test subject? Robert clenched his jaw, his voice dark with anger. Genesis Lab has been hiding far too much. In the corner of the room, Robert spotted an old computer coated in dust. He powered it on and the monitor flickered weakly, displaying a folder named Camera Lab, Project X-23. Robert clicked the first video file. Grainy footage appeared. Tommy strapped to a chair, Max locked inside a steel cage, trembling. A cold male voice in the video said, Phase 3, begin the injection. Linda covered her mouth, muffling her sobs. My baby. Suddenly Max growled softly, ears standing straight. Footsteps echoed outside the hallway. Robert hissed under his breath, Lights off. Now. The room fell into complete darkness. Only the sound of their quickened breathing and pounding hearts remained. A harsh voice barked outside. There's movement in Warehouse 17. Check it now. The door burst open. Genesis Lab security guards stormed in, flashlights sweeping the room. Robert pulled Linda behind a shelf, Max crouching low, growling softly. The beam of a flashlight swept past their faces. Robert whispered sharply, Now or never! Run! They bolted from the hiding spot. Max lunged forward, knocking one guard to the ground, snarling and snapping his jaws. Linda screamed, The exit! Over there. Red alarm lights blazed. Sirens wailed across the warehouse. Robert grabbed Linda's hand, pulling her toward a small door behind the shelves. They dashed inside, finding a narrow, dimly lit concrete tunnel. Linda panted, clutching her chest. This must be the transfer route Genesis used for their test subjects. At the tunnel's end, they discovered a small safe. Robert forced it open, revealing another classified document, Project Tommy Final Phase. On the first page, Sample 48, scheduled for final serum injection. Robert's eyes blazed with fury. We have to stop them, now! Suddenly, Robert's flashlight flickered and died. From behind them, a cold, steady voice emerged from the darkness. You've seen far too much. Robert spun around, the glint of a syringe catching his eye. Linda gasped in terror. Doctor! Kane! Max growled deeply, ready to attack. The screen cuts to black. Narrator, low and tense. Genesis Lab won't let them leave so easily, and the truth is far more terrifying than they ever imagined. Part 6, Project X-23. The past awakens. Darkness swallowed the room. Dr. Kane's footsteps echoed sharply against the cold concrete floor. In his hand, a syringe glimmered faintly. X-23 serum, glowing green beneath the dim light. Robert shielded Max behind him, Linda clutching the classified files to her chest. Kane's cold smile cut through the silence. Sample 47, I finally found you. Max growled low, his fur bristling, eyes glowing faintly with restrained energy. Robert stepped forward, voice steady. If you want Max or Tommy, you'll have to go through me first. Kane snapped his fingers. 2 Genesis Lab security guards lunged forward. Max leapt with explosive force, knocking one guard to the ground. The second fired a tranquilizer dart. Robert yanked Linda to safety just in time. A shot grazed Robert's shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt. Still he stood tall, glaring at Kane. Kane's voice was cold and measured. "You'll see. X-23 has changed Max more than you realize," Robert shouted angrily. "What did you do to him?" Kane tossed a thick file onto the floor. Its cover read, "Sample 47, Genetic Test Results." He spoke slowly, each word sharp as a knife. "Max isn't just a dog, he's the only surviving subject from the first generation of X-23 experiments. His DNA is the key. He can save Tommy or destroy him." Linda gasped, staggering backward, clutching the wall. Robert's fists clenched tightly, trembling with anger. Max lowered his ears, sensing the tension, his breath ragged. Fragments of memories flooded his mind. Tommy crying in a cold room. Blinding lights. Kane shouting, "Increase the dosage by 20%!" Max whimpered, collapsing briefly, his heartbeat racing wildly. Robert knelt, hugging Max tightly. "Stay with me, buddy. You're okay." Linda's voice cracked. "God, he's remembering everything. What did they do to him?" Kane stepped closer, his voice low and deliberate. "Tommy's still alive, but without Max's original blood sample, his body won't survive." Robert stared at him in disbelief. "You're not turning Max into an experiment again." Suddenly red alarms blared across the facility. Sirens screamed as Genesis Lab security swarmed the halls. Robert grabbed Linda's hand, pulling her toward an emergency door. Max sprinted ahead, teeth bared, taking down 2 guards as they burst into the stairwell. "Down there!" Linda shouted, pointing toward a narrow ventilation shaft. They crawled through the tight space, sliding into a hidden underground corridor. At the end of the corridor stood a massive steel door. Robert pushed it open and froze. Inside, glass chambers lined the walls, glowing faintly blue. Dozens of test tubes contained suspended human figures, their bodies connected to wires and tubes. Linda's voice cracked in horror. "Oh my God, they weren't just experimenting on animals!" Robert stepped forward, his heart pounding. A small plaque caught his eye. "Sample 48, Tommy Martinez." Inside the chamber, Tommy lay unconscious, his frail body hooked up to machines, heart monitor fluctuating dangerously. Linda pressed her palms to the glass, sobbing, "Tommy, Mommy's here." Suddenly Kane appeared in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the red emergency lights. His voice was ice cold. "If you want to save him, give me Max." Robert stepped forward, shielding Max behind him. "Over my dead body!" Kane lifted a small remote. Alarms screamed louder. Tommy's heart monitor beeped wildly. "Cardiac arrest in 60 seconds. Fade to black. Narrator whispers, low and urgent. 60 seconds to save Tommy, and Max is the only key. Part 7. 60 seconds to save Tommy. Red lights flashed violently across the Genesis lab. A deafening alarm filled the air. Cardiac arrest in 60 seconds. Linda screamed, pressing both hands against the glass chamber where Tommy lay unconscious, tubes and wires tangled around his small body. "Tommy, please, stay with me." Robert grabbed her shoulders, voice trembling but steady. "Listen to me, Linda. We can still save him, but we need Max." Max stood beside Robert, ears alert, eyes fixed on Tommy. He barked softly, as if sensing the urgency. Suddenly, Dr. Kane stepped forward, holding a small metal case. "The only way Tommy survives," he said coldly, "is if we use Max's original blood sample." Robert's jaw tightened. "You're insane! You're not turning him into an experiment again." Robert knelt beside Max, stroking his wet black and tan fur gently. "Buddy, I need you now." Max lowered his head, ears folding back, as if understanding every word. Robert attached a thin tube to Max's leg, drawing his blood directly into the machine feeding Tommy's chamber. Linda wiped her tears, whispering shakily, "Please, Mac, save my son." Max winced but didn't move, his big brown eyes locked on Tommy. Beeping sounds filled the room as Max's blood mixed with the genetic stabilizer, slowly transferring into Tommy's body. Robert whispered softly, "Hang on, buddy. You're stronger than this." The heart monitor spiked suddenly. Beep, beep, beep. Tommy gasped, his small chest rising weakly. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing watery eyes. Linda sobbed in relief, pressing her forehead against the glass. "Oh my God, Tommy!" Robert exhaled deeply, hugging Max tightly. "You did it, boy. You saved him." Max rested his head against Robert's chest, exhausted but alive. For a moment, hope returned. But it didn't last. Just as Linda reached for the chamber release, a loud metallic click echoed. Dr. Kane aimed a tranquilizer gun at Max. "Step aside, Robert. Max belongs to me." Robert stepped forward, shielding Max behind his body. "Over my dead body." Kane's finger hovered over the trigger. Genesis security guards stormed into the room, rifles raised, laser sights glowing red. Max growled fiercely, standing protectively in front of Tommy's chamber, fur bristling, teeth bared. Robert whispered, "Stay behind me, buddy. This isn't over." Fade to black. Narrator whispers, "Tommy survived." But the battle for Max has just begun. Part 8. X-23. Awakens, the price of freedom. The Genesis lab shook violently as red alarms blared. Tommy sat weak but alive in Robert's arms, while Dr. Kane raised a glowing syringe filled with the X-23 serum. Robert yelled furiously, "You're not touching him!" Kane smirked coldly. "I'm not touching the boy. I'm upgrading the dog." Before Robert could react, security guards pinned him down. Kane injected the glowing green serum into Max's vein. Max whimpered once, then let out a deep, powerful growl. His brown eyes glowed faintly gold, his muscles tensing as if a new force surged within him. Beep, beep, beep. An ominous red signal blinked on Kane's handheld neural controller. Suddenly Max stiffened, ears erect, eyes glowing brighter. He growled, but this time not at Kane, at Robert. Robert stepped forward slowly, hands raised, voice shaking. "Max, buddy, it's me. Fight it!" Max's breathing grew heavy, torn between instinct and control. Behind Robert, Tommy cried out weakly, "Mac, please come back!" For a moment, Max's gaze softened, but the red controller kept flashing, forcing his body forward. With a roar, Robert smashed the neural controller out of Kane's hand. Max broke free. Golden sparks flashed in his eyes. Genesis security guards rushed in, rifles raised. Robert grabbed Tommy, shouting, "Run!" Max leapt into action, knocking one guard to the ground, teeth bared, muscles surging with power. Linda clutched a laptop containing Genesis' darkest secrets, following Robert as alarms screamed louder, sparks bursting from shattered panels all around them. Outside, the night was lit by chaos. Genesis lab erupted in a massive explosion, fireball reaching high into the sky. Thick, black smoke rolled into the Denver night. In the foreground, Robert carried Tommy tightly in his arms. Linda held the classified files close to her chest, and Max, his wet black and tan fur singed slightly, stood tall and proud beside Robert, chest heaving, eyes glowing faintly gold. Narrator whispers softly, "Tommy survived. Max was free, but Genesis wasn't finished."